Okay, ladies and gentlemen, all aboard the history train. Have a writing device ready as you prepare to do your notes on feudal Japan. Start by looking at the map of Japan in the bottom right-hand corner of your notes. Japan is a series of islands, thousands of islands, that has been isolated or separated from other countries throughout its history. Because of this, Japan's historical culture and government are not similar to China or any of the surrounding areas. Japan developed much slower than the other countries and areas. By 500 BC, well after the time of the Mesopotamians, Egyptians, and the Chinese built large cities, temples, and had developed technology, Japan was still an underdeveloped and poor area. You can see down here by looking at this map. Whoops. Okay, because of these seas here, the China Sea, people really couldn't get into Japan. Japan was totally separate. Also, because there were thousands and thousands of islands, it was difficult to get there and find people living in Japan. Japan has been called the land of the rising sun. It's their nickname. The reason for this nickname is if you're looking at Japan from China and the Koreas, it looks like the sun rises over Japan every day. So as I mentioned before, Japan consists of about 4,000 tiny islands, and there are 4 major islands that the Japanese live on. You did those in your assignment yesterday: Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu. In its most ancient time, there was no central rule, so they didn't have a king, they didn't have an emperor like the ancient Chinese did. The people were divided into clans. Clans are a group of people who live together and they hunt together. There were thousands and thousands of clans, and none of them held really any major power of any kind. So there are no organized cities, and there's little division of labor. Out of these clans comes a Japanese religion we really didn't talk about in our religion unit called Shinto. Shinto is similar to Confucianism in the fact that they worship their ancestors, but it is different in the fact that it revolves around nature worship. An important symbol, like a cross for a Christian or the Star of David for Jews, is this gate called torii that you see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You will still see many of these gates in Japan today as representation of Shintoism. So here's a Japanese traditional castle. You'll see a couple of these here. Very beautiful architecture. Many of them are still around today that you can go and see if you were to visit this area. If you remember from our China unit, the Silk Road was a trading route that connected the world. The Chinese traded many things to Europe, like silk, porcelain. Europe traded many things. Horses came along, gold, silver, things like that. You traded yourself along the Silk Road during an activity, and most of you even survived. As traders eventually made their way into Japan, they brought the religion Buddhism into this area. This is still one of the most practiced religions in Japan today. You can see here other things that spread into Japan from China. Prince Shotoku sent several missions into China. From China, he got a system of writing, which the Japanese system of writing is not identical, but similar today in the fact that it's made up of characters, different art styles, and a strong central government. So as you recall, like Emperor Qin from China, they had emperors, which is a strong central ruler. Japan would attempt to install a ruler as well. That would be an emperor. The Tale of Genji, I'm not going to say much about it. It's over 1,000 pages and there are over 500 characters in it. Very, very confusing. It was one of the first novels that came from this time period. If you want to know more about it, read it, have fun. It's about the life of a prince in an imperial court. He wants power, doesn't get power, gets upset, and a series of unfortunate events happen to him from there. Similar to the cultures you studied last year, ancient Japan had a system of feudalism. Do you remember when you built those fiefdoms for your 6th grade teachers last year? That represents feudalism. These living areas where people had different roles was a central part of Japanese history for hundreds of years. While those in Japanese feudalism had the same roles, so you have your peasants, you have your landowners, you have your protectors, which were knights from what you studied last year. In feudal Japan, they are given different names. So a system of feudalism is really going to be the main system of government that we're studying today. In a feudal society, land and food are exchanged for military protection. So you basically have people making deals. I'll give you food, I'll feed you, I'll give you a place to live if you go out and you fight bad guys and protect me. Likewise, those samurai, which you'll learn about, they fought bad guys and kept people safe in exchange for a place to live and stuff to eat. So Japanese lords gave away some of their land to other people in exchange for loyalty and military service. You'll have an opportunity to do that at the end of class today. So here are some of the main characters in the Japanese feudal system. As you can see in the top left here, there's a Japanese emperor. The emperors did not have as much power as they did in China, but you can see him. He's sitting on a nice little rug there, looking very well fed. As you can tell, that's a sign of wealth. Next is the shogun. A shogun is a military leader. They're very fierce. The shoguns, for all intents and purposes, had all of the power in ancient Japan. On the bottom left, you see a daimyo. That is a fancy term for a landowner. So these daimyos, they owned the fiefdoms, they ran them, they controlled their peasants, as you can see in the bottom right. So the peasants would work for the daimyo in exchange for a place to live. Also, you see here the samurai. The samurai would fight and protect different daimyos' land areas in exchange for a place to live and food as well. So you can see here, here's the hierarchy of power. An emperor is a Japanese political ruler. Shogun had military powers. Samurai were warriors. The merchants, there were some craftspeople, they facilitated trade, and this marked the beginning of the Japanese economic system. At the very bottom, there were the peasants, who were the poorest of all, and almost 90% of Japanese society, unfortunately at this time, were peasants that did this role. They worked the land which belonged to the daimyo, or the local lords. So you can see this in a different way here. You may want to take a moment and pause and fill this in on your notes. This is the hierarchy, so obviously the higher up you go, the fewer people there are, okay? Ooh, I'm having fun drawing. And the lower you go, so I'm kind of putting a jagged circle here. So there weren't very many emperors or shogun. The lower you go, the more people there were here. This map shows all of the different fiefdoms or land areas in feudal Japan. So each colored and surrounded area is ruled by a different leader. So you can see there are tons and tons and tons of different people with power. Because there were so many different clans or fiefdoms here, it was hard for one emperor to unite and rule all of these areas. An emperor or central ruler really had a hard time reaching all of these different areas. So the system of feudalism and the rule of the emperor would decline. The emperor realized more or less that they didn't have the power to rule all these separate individual independent areas, and eventually the military leaders or shoguns took over power here. So the noble families or the daimyos, those who were in charge of their lands, they got really greedy. They did not want to obey the emperor. They wanted more land, more resources, more riches, more wealth. They wanted more power, and that led to some problems for the emperor. As you can see on the right, this is a wealthy landowner who wants power, represented very cleverly by the word bubble. It says, "I want power." Many of these people raised their own armies and went to war with other local landowners. They wanted to reach out and control as much land as possible. The key figures in these mini battles that played out all across Japan are the samurai warriors that participated. So each landowner had samurai, and they would command their samurai to attack other landowners and other samurai in an attempt to gain their land and their resources. And this really bred a time of chaos and unrest all throughout Japan. So they were private armies. The countryside, the fields, they became lawless. There was no central government or emperor to say, these are the rules, these are our laws. Basically, the law of the sword and fear of intimidation is what followed. Borderline anarchy here at this time. So many have heard of samurai, but you're not exactly sure what they did or what role they really played. The bottom line is that samurai translates directly to one who serves. These samurai served the landowners and were put up against others in battles for land. Eventually, samurai warriors became a huge part of Japanese culture. Their code of ethics and laws are called the Bushido, which is important. They are encouraged to be extremely courageous. So where it says reckless courage, well, that means if you're commanded to do something, even if it's to go into a battle of 1 versus 1,000, you do it. That's your role as a samurai. They're encouraged to be prayerful, fair, generous, and above all, what is unbelievably important to the samurai is they believe the most important thing in their life was to have an honorable death. To die in battle or to die protecting someone was the ultimate goal or the ultimate grace or compliment for these samurai warriors. For those of you who know a little bit about World War II, the kamikaze pilots, this mindset kind of led into that. So you can see here how the samurai dress, the tools they had, their goal was to look as intimidating as possible. That's why, as you see here, and there's, see up here, a lot of times they would put animal horns on their helmets. They'd put metal spikes on their helmets. They did this just to terrify those that they were going into battle with. They rode on horses. They had long knives. They had long swords. Some of them were also skilled archers, and you can see the incredible size of the bow that these samurai warriors had. They prided themselves in their training. And here's a picture of me if I was a samurai, and my fearless cat Jorge if she was the horse that would ride me into battle here. Something tells me we wouldn't do too well at this time. The samurai swords are extremely long. They're made of the finest metals. They were long enough that they could be flexible. The flexibility of the sword was important because it allowed them to sustain blows from other attackers. So the metal would actually kind of collapse and bend in but not break as a defensive. Also, they were long enough and sleek enough that they could deal deadly blows when needed. As you see down here, another technology that the samurai developed is they had their armor was actually, it had a lining of cowhide or animal hide sewn into their jackets that they wore. This threading of the cowhide or animal hide, or really whatever animal they could get a hold on, this allowed them, this was the best form of body armor at the time, very hard to break through. So here are some samurai in battle. You can see them riding on horses. Those horses too spread along the Silk Road. There are no horses indigenous to Japan. Those are all gained in trade. Here are samurai charging. The red flag here represents one of the fiefs or one of the areas of land that these samurai were fighting for. My guess, and I don't know for sure, but my guess is because of the organization of colors, this is a very strong attack led by a shogun who is able to unite many different local lands in battle. Here's some review questions. Well, actually not quite yet. The final piece here is we just covered several hundred years of Japanese history from 500 BC when they were very, very undeveloped. We had some Chinese influence in writing, some technologies, the installation of an emperor, but most importantly, we have the many different areas of land in the form of feudalism. So the system of feudalism breaks down. There are many wars between clans. You saw the samurai in battle and many different images there. And the ultimate result of this are the shoguns, who are the military rulers. They now have power over Japan for several years. So the emperor really had no power whatsoever. He was just kind of an old wise dude who sat in a castle. He wasn't respected. He didn't have power over the different military leaders. At this time, the shogun, and really the shogun with the most samurai, were those who were the most powerful. So from 500 BC to 1854, that's almost 2,000 years. Actually, that's more than 2,000 years of history summarized here. So I'm assuming you've gone through, you've been pausing with your notes. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to, on your note sheet, there are a series of review questions. Also, if you go to my Canvas agenda, so here are the review questions there on your note sheet for you to answer. If you go to my Canvas agenda, you will find a link for a timeline. So you must answer these questions and my timeline questions, and there is a Canvas quiz over those. Please let me know at this